Today I'm going to be talking really about two major things, innovation and partnership. These two things, frankly, they cannot be successful without each other. And oftentimes the difference between just a good idea and a true innovation is knowing the right partners to pick. Before I get into the main part of the presentation, I thought I'd start out today with a little bit of a story. A true story, actually, that happens in 2 acts. Act 1, a few scientists backed by a venture capital group are trying to discover a gel that can be used for cornea eye replacement. Late at night, one of the scientists, being a little bit more clumsy, actually spilled some of the gel, actually quite a lot of the gel. After the other scientists got through with yelling at him for a good hour or so, they went back to check on the gel, and it had hardened into a thin film. When they peeled that film back, it actually took about 10 years of chemical stains, coffee stains, everything with it. And at that point, the scientists realized, maybe we have something that we weren't planning on, a little bit different than we originally investigated. Enter Act 2, 2 government agencies, the military and the Department of Energy, were both looking and on the same quest for some kind of material that will allow them to clean some of the most hazardous materials, whether it's nuclear radioactive materials, heavy metals, even asbestos. Interestingly enough, these two groups came together. And what they found was this gel, which was originally developed for biomedical uses in the eye, was actually amazingly good at capturing all kinds of hazardous materials. Not only does it pick it up, but it actually encapsulates the hazardous materials, binds it at a molecular level, and pulls it all away. This gel today is actually being used to clean significant parts of the fallout in Fukushima, Japan. And actually, they did a very nice kind of charity event where they actually cleaned an entire school that was very close to Fukushima. That for a long time, the students weren't allowed outside, couldn't touch anything, couldn't play in the playground, because frankly it was contaminated. They cleaned all of that, and now the kids are back out playing on the playground. And this all started with a little bit of an accident. So what is the kind of the moral of my story? There's 2 things. One, for those of you who have kids, if your son or your daughter spills something, don't get angry. You never know when that may lead to something big. Second, finding the right partners is key. These guys, when they started off, they really had a completely different idea for the use of this gel. If it wasn't for the backing and cooperation of the government to help them test, it's not easy to walk into a nuclear plant and test your gel on something. Without that backing, they would have never gotten to where they are today. So in that sense, partnerships and knowing who to work with can be key. With that, I'll get into the main part of my presentation. The first few slides is a little bit on who I am and GE. It's a necessary evil. I'll go through it relatively quickly. And the second part of the presentation is really about some of the partnership ideas that I'd like to leave you with to hopefully will trigger some of the possible thinking, especially for today, when we're going to hear presentations both from innovators and entrepreneurs, as well as venture capital groups, as well as other organizations. Starting with the first slide. The way I like to introduce, I work for GE. I basically run their private equity platform for Asia Pacific. The way I always like to introduce GE is not to talk about anything other than the innovations they've done, because it's, as probably many of you know, GE started with Thomas Edison and the light bulb. That was actually the original history of GE. But since then, GE's done the first medical X-ray, and that's grown into GE Healthcare today. GE did the very first television broadcast, actually, in the world. I didn't even know that myself. That's actually grown into what is now NBC Universal Studios. We did the first US jet engine. That's grown into GE aircraft engines. We did the first man-made diamonds, which I had no idea about either. I'm not sure what the specific usage was at that time, but today it's clearly a big part of it. I'll skip all the way to the end, where the latest thing we've been doing is we've launched an Echo Imagination project. And this is really a pet goal of our new chairman, Jeff Emmerich, who really felt it was necessary for any major corporate today to take the next step into the future. You have to be green, you have to be conscious of that, And you have to know that that's a big driver, not just where the world's going, but how we're going to live our lives. GE does a ton of stuff. I won't go through them all. One thing I'll tell you, I always love giving this tip because first time somebody from aircraft engines told me, I always look for it whenever I fly. GE makes, there's only two major aircraft engine companies in the world, GE and Rolls-Royce. The way you can tell if it's a GE engine, the front of the engine has a little spiral. So if next time you're getting on a plane and you walk by the engine, if you see a little plate spiral, that's a GE engine. Other than that, I'll just say we make all kinds of stuff, from wind turbines, to locomotives, to good old light bulbs still there. What do I do? So I run a private equity platform. We're a growth capital investor, covering all of Asia Pacific. We've invested in a ton of companies across Asia, including in the CleanTech space. We've invested in solar, we've invested in wind, pretty much the full gamut. I've talked a little bit about it, but I won't go into it. But again, within each of these divisions of GE, there's a ton of stuff. And I'm sure there's probably something that connects to almost every major industry that our company does. Into the heart of the solution, what I really want to talk about today, and something that I think actually segues very well for today's overall conversation. The first thing I'll start with is, I personally believe this to be extremely true. The most important innovations must address societal needs and drive economic sustainability. It can't be one or the other. It's got to be something that can actually make a difference in what people need and what the world needs. But it also has to be economically sustainable. What does that fundamentally mean? It has to be profitable. It can't always be supported by subsidies. At some point in time, all these things have to be commercialized. And that's a big part of what a lot of people in this room are trying to do. Either if you're an entrepreneur starting up with the technology, or if you're a venture capital trying to help those innovators kind of take their company to the next step. But these are the things that are going to drive innovations going forward. The model of innovation has changed quite a bit from Thomas Edison's day. Just reading through some of these statistics, the way companies innovate is totally different from before. More than ever, SMEs and individuals are going to be as innovators as large companies. As a large company, GE knows that better than anyone. We've sponsored venture capital funds for exactly that reason. We've actually been a major LP in a lot of venture capital funds for exactly that reason. We know a lot of those innovations that are happening, frankly, need to happen in these small pockets that we in the big corporation will never see. Today, innovation is driven as much by people's creativity as high-level scientific research. A lot of the innovations we see today are not necessarily groundbreaking things in a lab. It's oftentimes people just thinking of a different way of approaching a problem. More than ever, and I think this is absolutely true specifically in Asia Pacific, innovation needs to be localized. GE itself learned this lesson when we tried to introduce some of our healthcare products in a market like India. What we realized is huge MRIs, huge CAT scans that weigh 2 tons simply aren't that practical for serving a population that's distributed in millions of little villages, and oftentimes bringing the medical equipment to those villages is impossible if you're talking about a 2-ton CAT scan. So what GE came out with just for India were kind of very small portable devices. Small portable ultrasound, small portable x-rays, these kind of devices that could literally come down to the size of an iPad. What GE didn't realize is these local products designed for India became a huge hit everywhere else in the world. What they designed to address a specific need in India actually turned out to be something that the rest of the world wanted too. So that kind of localized creativity and innovation is very key, I think, in today's model of innovation. Second part I want to talk about in terms of partnerships. At the heart of it, I always believe, is the innovators themselves. Those scientists, those entrepreneurs who are willing to kind of take that leap of faith and think of something a little bit differently or approach a problem a little bit differently. But to make that happen, you got to have the right partnerships, whether you're talking about government, you're talking about large corporates like a GE, whether you're talking about venture capital or PE investors, because at the end of the day, you do need capital to make these things happen. DFIs, nonprofit organizations, all of these, particularly in areas like CleanTech, are key partners and key variables to help these innovators find and take their companies to the next step. What I want to talk about, and what I hope will give you an idea of potentially some things that you can do with your own cooperations and partnerships, is to talk a little bit about a particular initiative that GE has launched that is trying to leverage that idea of partnership. GE created an Eco-Imagination Challenge. The idea was to find some of these innovators out there. We pulled in some venture capital groups as partners to provide funding. And then GE came in with, as a big corporate sponsor, basically to help accelerate the growth of these companies by providing a huge plethora of industries where they can immediately try to apply their technologies. When they launched this, they thought maybe they'd get a few hundred applications. They got 5,000 applications within the first launch. 150 countries. It was unbelievable response. GE is now launching these same Eco-Imagination challenges in countries around the world. There's one going on in China right now. There's one in Australia that's going to come later this year. And I'm sure there'll be more in Asia Pacific very shortly. The whole idea is to basically find these young technology innovation companies, partner them with venture capital, and then give them the full strength and breadth of a huge industrial conglomerate like GE to help them get where they need to go. Part of what GE tries to do is what we call the Eco-Imagination Accelerator. The whole idea behind this is GE has, and is unique, one of the last remaining true kind of multi-industry conglomerates, is that it can offer a technology company a chance to vet their technology and find industrial applications for their technology in several different industries all at the same time. I'll give you one example. We invested in a nanofiber company in Korea. When we came into this company, their main usage was for the textile sector. They supplied to North Face. They were basically using nanofiber for a kind of new age Gore-Tex. Like Gore-Tex with all the water penetration barrier issues, but also breathable, because one of the main complaints about Gore-Tex is it's not breathable. So if you're doing exercise or running in a full Gore-Tex suit, you're going to just die. North Face has started to buy this stuff, and then it's been kind of selling it under the retail brand Politech. When we met this company, within the first 30 minutes of discussion, what we came to realize, both of us simultaneously, is the industrial applications for this nanofiber is probably 10x the textile applications. You're talking about water filtration, GE energy applications, healthcare applications, industrial manufacturing applications, environmental filtration, all kinds of things in these applications. We've taken this company and introduced them to GE Energy, who has already signed a first supply agreement. GE Healthcare is vetting them now with an MOU, and also GE Water is also vetting them for you. But that's exactly the idea, to take these kind of small technology companies who have a brilliant idea, and then trying to help them find those industrial applications. Another example of a company we've been working with, Better Place. Better Place, for those of you who haven't come across them yet, their view is electrical vehicles is a fascinating high-growth sector, but what everybody's focusing on is the electrical vehicle itself. What they focused on is really the charging system. That in order for electric vehicles to really take off, there has to be a convenient, well-distributed system of charging systems that are as extensive as gas stations are today. They came up with a unique model of how to do that. They got a lot of support. They've raised, I think, probably over $1 billion globally doing this. GE came in as a key partner to try to help them develop the charging station itself. Because the charging station has to be one that's very fast, it has to be very clean, it has to be safe enough for people to have at home, but also powerful enough that you can recharge your car battery in a reasonable amount of time. So this partnership between GE and Better Place has been going on for a while, and we're launching now possibly an investment with them in Australia. What I'll end with, because I wanted to make sure I left some time for Q&A, is as you sit through the rest of the presentations today, as you meet other delegates, whether they're from venture capital firms or from organizations, government organizations, nonprofit organizations, or if you meet these innovators themselves who at the end of the day I think are the heart of everything we're trying to do, think creatively how all these partnerships could work together to make something a little bit more powerful. Because frankly, as we try to go out and clean and reinvent the world in a much greener way, we got to transform the way we use our natural resources. We've got to look at innovation, and we've got to think of the right kind of partnerships and collaborations. So just kind of remind yourself as you're meeting companies, as you go out and meet delegates and hear speakers today, of how maybe that chance accidental encounter or the chance spilling of a gel on the ground can lead to something very interesting, and being open to possibly even changing some of the directions you originally headed with some of the partners that you might